Coming up on Arirang News, leaders attending the P4G Seoul Summit hosted in the Korean capital adopt the Seoul Declaration, pledging further efforts to cut carbon emissions and take action on a range of environmental and social issues. Data shows South Korea's exports surged last month by more than 45% from a year earlier, the highest percentage increase in more than 3 decades as the global economy opens back up. And South Korea's vaccination campaign is speeding up. Close to 650,000 military personnel and reservists have made appointments for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And now more than 11% of the population has gotten at least one vaccine dose. It's 5:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. Our top story this afternoon, the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit came to an end on Monday following a 2-day run. More than 60 global leaders and heads of international organizations gathered for the virtual summit to coordinate efforts against climate change. In the end, they adopted the Seoul Declaration. Our senior Blue House correspondent Kim Min-ji reports.
President Moon Jae-in, as the host of the P4G Seoul Summit, said the event helped unite the will of the international community to realize inclusive green recovery toward carbon neutrality. The curtain came down on the 2-day virtual summit on Monday with the adoption of the Seoul Declaration, urging sustainable and green efforts in the fight against climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic.
정상들은 기후 위기가 환경 문제만이 아니라 경제, 사회, 안보, 인권에 영향을 미치는 문제라는 데 동의하고 코로나19 역시 녹색 회복을 통해 극복해 나가야 한다는 데 인식을 같이 했습니다.
In the 14-point statement, the leaders also agreed to further strengthen cooperation to realize the goals of the Paris Agreement, namely to limit global warming to close to 1.5 degrees Celsius. They also encouraged countries to submit their enhanced goals for reducing emissions before the UN Climate Change Conference in November. In that respect, the participants agreed to promote a transition to renewable energy, while phasing out existing coal projects and ending financing for the overseas construction of coal power plants. The declaration also included a clause noting the severity of marine pollution and the need for global solidarity to address the issue. The leaders said they will not leave anyone behind, taking into account different national circumstances, as well as socially and environmentally vulnerable communities, and supporting a green transition in developing countries.
지금까지의 국제사회 노력에 더해져 이번 회의를 통해 강화된 민관 협력이 다가오는 11월 제26차 기후변화 당사국 총회를 성공적으로 이끌 것이라고 확신합니다.
The P4G Summit was the first multilateral meeting related to the environment that South Korea has ever hosted, bringing together more than 60 heads of state, senior government officials, and leaders of international organizations. Seoul now passes the baton to Bogota, which will host the next P4G Summit in 2023. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And having successfully hosted the P4G Seoul Summit, South Korea has taken center stage in global summit diplomacy by highlighting issues like climate change and sustainable growth. It'll now work to implement follow-up measures. Yoon Jung-min reports.
During the P4G Seoul Summit, South Korea pledged to expand its contributions to restore the environment in developing countries and urged the international community to take part.
We'll create Green New Deal trust funds worth $5 million a year at the GGGI, which provides tailored green growth support to developing countries. We'll also contribute $4 million a year as part of P4G contributions.
As a follow-up, South Korea also plans to hold financial support for overseas coal power and will ban the construction of new coal power plants domestically to achieve carbon neutrality while actively cooperating to restore biodiversity. This year's P4G Seoul Summit marked the first ever multilateral climate summit to be hosted by South Korea, becoming the first Asian country to use this platform to raise awareness of climate issues since the first in Denmark in 2018. The summit had extra significance due to 2021 being the first year of the Paris Agreement being implemented and because it was held ahead of the UN Climate Change Conference, known as the COP26, slated for November in Glasgow. It was also another high-level multilateral climate forum bringing nations together, following on from the virtual Leaders Summit on Climate in April, led by U.S. President Joe Biden.
Through the Climate Summit in April, the South Korea-US Summit in May, P4G Summit, and the G7 Summit scheduled for next week, President Moon Jae-in and US President Joe Biden have agreed to cooperate at the UN Climate Change Conference this November.
Due to the pandemic, the summit brought together people from around the world virtually. Through virtual meetings, the P4G Seoul Summit highlighted new ways of hosting a global summit. South Korea displayed state-of-the-art technology through augmented reality and advanced media, using video mapping technology to produce hologram-like images of nature and endangered animals. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The South Korean government is raising capital gains taxes on people who own multiple homes. From today, the rate will be as high as 75%. Taxes also going up on people who sell their homes within 2 years of buying them. The government wants to discourage people from buying homes for speculation, and the hope is that will cool down the overheated market. So In-kyung has this report.
Multiple homeowners, as well as people who sell their houses after a short period of time, are set to pay higher taxes on any profits made from selling their properties. The Korean government announced on Tuesday 3 new rules for capital gains tax. First, the capital gains tax on the sale of a house owned for less than a year would jump from 40% to 70%. Second, when it comes to a house owned less than 2 years, the applied tax rate will go up to 60% from the basic tax rate of 6 to 45%. Third, those who own multiple properties in regulated areas will have to pay a premium on top of the basic capital gains taxes. If they own 2 homes, this premium will increase to 20 percentage points, and if they own 3 or more homes, it will be 30 percentage points. For instance, before June, a person who owns 2 houses but sells one for a profit of 1 billion won, or roughly $900,000 would have to pay about $500,000 in capital gains tax. However, from June 1st, that person would have to pay roughly $180,000 more in tax. Market watchers say that the new rules are likely to discourage multiple homeowners from selling their properties as they expect property prices to keep rising and because they expect a little gain from property sales after tax. 서은경, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports in May were up more than 40% from a year ago, thanks to strong global demand for semiconductors, cars, and petrochemical products. It's the 7th consecutive month of gains and the biggest on-year growth in more than 3 decades. Min Soo-kyun reports.
South Korea's exports jumped in May from a year earlier, marking the 7th consecutive month of growth. The Trade Ministry on Tuesday said exports last month amounted to $50.7 billion, an increase of 45.6% on-year. This is the highest on-year increase for any month of May, and in terms of growth, it marks the biggest on-year gain in 32 years. Exports have been logging gains since last November, and it's the first time exports have seen on-year gains of more than 40% for 2 straight months. The double-digit export growth was due to overall growth in 14 major items. Outbound shipments of semiconductors rose 24.5%, extending gains for the 11th consecutive month, while exports of cars jumped almost 94%, the biggest increase in almost 15 years. Petrochemical exports also spiked about 95% and petroleum products by 164%. Shipments to the country's major trading partners in May expanded significantly. Shipments to the US, the European Union, and Southeast Asia were all up by more than 60%, while shipments to China rose 23%. Meanwhile, imports climbed almost 38% on-year to $47.8 billion, resulting in an overall trade surplus of around $3 billion. This marks the 13th straight month that South Korea has posted a trade surplus. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
The OECD has revised up its 2021 growth outlook for South Korea's economy and the global economy. In a report out Monday, the OECD projects South Korea's economy to grow 3.8%. That's up half a percentage point from its previous forecast in March due to rising signs of a rapid economic recovery. It also positively evaluated Seoul's New Deal initiative, saying it expects the plan to boost productivity and growth. The OECD expects global GDP growth to be 5.8% this year, up 0.2 percentage points from its earlier forecast. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yong-won Securities. Mr. Yu, good afternoon. Thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon.
Well, the U.S. stock markets were closed on Monday for Memorial Day. In Europe, stocks were down for the day, but they did well for the month. Asian stocks today kind of a mix, but mostly higher. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, in general, everybody is looking at a lot of the retail sales data coming from all over the world, and it seems to show that there are quite significant recovery that's happening. If you look at Japan's retail sales number, it jumped 12% year on year in April, and it seems to be happening in a global pace. European stock did a bit of a correction yesterday, but today it's showing quite significant rise, because the Eurozone economy is rebounding from double-digit recession caused by the pandemics. All in all, vaccination is driving the recovery, and overall retail sales numbers are all recovering on the global scale. And I think that will have a positive implication for U.S. market as it opens in the future. All in all, sentiment seems to be quite positive in terms of the equity market because of very strong economic data.
Right, and as we just mentioned a minute ago, a lot of international organizations and the Korean government itself have been raising their growth forecast for the local economy, and the latest one to do so is the OECD. It's calling for growth of 3.8% now, and that's an increase of half a percentage point. How do you think all this optimism is factoring into the markets?
Yes, today Korean market did quite nicely. As you said, the South Korea's economy is forecasting to grow 3.8% this year on back of strong export growth and exponentially macroeconomic policies. If you look at the projection before, it was 3.3%, has revised up by 0.5 percentage point. OECD is saying that there's a very strong overseas demand for IT products, which accounts for the fifth of total exports, and automobile is lifting the export in general. So all in all, this is putting quite positive implications for Korea. Also, the government is putting relief packages to help the households and firms, and clearly this is a positive news for Korean economy. So if the Korean economy grows by 3.8% this year, the equity market probably has more room to go up higher in the future, given the fact that the earnings growth for Korean KOSPI is expected to be over 55% this year, and another rise next year in the future.
Well, oil prices are up today by about 1%, with demand expected to rise and outstrip supply in the second half of this year. Another commodity, gold, is up too for a third day. What do you see happening with these commodities?
Right. If you look at the oil price, it's up about 1% on Monday. It's driven by the expectation that the demand is recovering with the summer travel and reopening economies. And it will accommodate easily, even though there is quite a bit of an increase from the OPEC plus productions. All in all, even though there's a shale gas productions that will be picking up in the future, we do expect continuously overall the numbers will be quite positive for the oil demand for the time being as the economy recovers. In terms of the gold, if you look at the money supply growth rate, it is looking at about year-on-year growth rate of about 17% for the M1. Because of that, we think that there will be more room for alternative assets, which is gold, and gold price is expected to show further rise with the inflation coming in as we see.
And speaking of those kinds of issues, if we could look at cryptocurrencies for a minute, Bitcoin has seen a little bounce back up from its recent low, but of course it's still down around 40% from where it was in early May. Where do you see crypto going from here?
Right. It all depends on what happens to the M1 growth rate and the liquidity in the system. If you look at the U.S. M1 growth rate, it is around 17-18% year on year. If that's the case, then the currency value does decline as the rise of M1 happens. If that's the case, the demand for the gold or cryptocurrency rises. At the beginning of this year, most of that demand for the alternative asset was all focused on cryptocurrency. However, with the government regulation coming in very heavily, and that results into the cryptocurrency correction, while the gold price rising quite significantly. All in all, we should calculate as adding both sides of assets, including the cryptocurrency as well as the gold and maybe silver, and estimate that value as a total to rise by somewhere between 15 to 20% per annum. It's clearly inverse relationship between gold prices and cryptocurrency. As the cryptocurrency prices corrects, the gold prices rises. However, though, in terms of the cryptocurrencies, it seems to be kind of bottoming out recently. Given that has corrected quite significantly from the peak to bottom of over 50%. As the demand for the alternative asset continues to remain quite strong, we think that the price should stabilize and overall alternative asset value to rise YOY this year.
Got it. All right, we'll have to leave it there for today. Mr. Yu, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us. We always appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
South Korea is easing the distancing rules from today for people who've gotten at least one dose of a coronavirus vaccine. They'll be able to meet with bigger groups of family. Also, South Korea will be taking delivery in the coming hours of its first vaccine doses from Moderna. And rollout of the single-shot vaccine from Johnson & Johnson starts next week. Choi Won-jong has the details.
People who've been vaccinated with their first dose of COVID-19 vaccine can now meet up for gatherings with immediate family members beyond the limit of 8 people. This means if 5 people in your family have received their first doses, up to 13 family members can meet up. Also, starting Tuesday, face-to-face visits are now allowed in nursing homes if either the patient or visitor has completed 2 shots of the vaccine. Plus, centers for senior citizens will open their doors for those who already had their first jabs. There will be new COVID-19 vaccines introduced for the first time in South Korea this week. The first batch of Moderna COVID-19 vaccine will arrive in South Korea on Tuesday, 1 day later than scheduled. More than 55,000 doses from Moderna will touch down. Starting from the middle of June, medical workers under 30 will be eligible for the Moderna vaccine. Johnson & Johnson's Janssen vaccine will also arrive in Seoul this Saturday. Over 1 million doses of vaccine will be available for reservists, members of civil defense, and those related to country's defense and foreign affairs over the age of 30. First-come, first-served reservations have already kicked off early Tuesday morning, and inoculation will start next Thursday. As of Tuesday, more than 5.7 million people in South Korea have received their first dose of COVID-19 vaccines. That's over 11% of the population. Meanwhile, the authorities reported 459 cases of COVID-19 on Tuesday. All but 10 were locally transmitted. The nation's total number of cases now stands at over 140,000. 최원정, 아리랑 뉴스.
And the number of new coronavirus cases in South Korea today remained in the 400s for a third straight day. The first time that's happened since the fourth wave of the virus hit in late March. There were 459 new cases and 4 additional deaths. That raises the death toll to 1,963. Meanwhile, South Korea confirmed 202 more cases of COVID-19 variants last week, most of them the UK variant. There have now been almost 1,600 variant cases in total. Those mutations of the virus were estimated to account for 33.1% of new cases last week, a decline from the week before, but still an indication that the variants are spreading fast. In other news, North Korea has created a new position for an official to serve as the regime's second in command. That post will be called First Party Secretary, and it's expected that it'll be given to a close aide to the regime's leader. Experts say it's quite unusual for the North to officially give someone such a clear role and ostensible power in the leadership. Kim Da-mi has the details.
North Korea has made room for a second in command, with one of Kim Jong-un's closest aides, Yong-won, likely to get it. Sources familiar with the regime say the First Party Secretary role was created at the Workers' Party Congress held earlier this year.
Yong-won is known to be a loyal aide rather than someone who exercises power. So it's highly likely that Cho will be in charge of connecting the leader to members of the Politburo Standing Committee.
Should he get it, he will fill the second highest position in the party after Kim Jong-un, who is a general secretary. After being promoted in January, Jo is one of 5 members on the Politburo Standing Committee alongside leader Kim Jong-un, Choi Ryong-hae, Lee Byung-chul, and Kim Duk-hun. While it's unusual for the regime to give someone such a clear second-in-command role, experts say this role could shed light on who will be Kim Jong-un's successor.
If Kim Yo-jong takes the role, she will succeed her brother. But if Cho Yong-won does, he will be in charge of administrative tasks, and this is because of the regime's so-called Paek-2 bloodline.
The expert added that if someone else takes the second-in-command position, the possibility of that person exercising real power cannot be ruled out. The First Party Secretary is the title that Kim Jong-un held for 4 years from the time he took over from his late father in 2012. That secretary system was then scrapped, but in January, North Korea adopted it again, and Kim Jong-un was named General Secretary. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
The city of Seoul is hosting a contest to choose a design for a distinctive souvenir that signifies the best the South Korean capital has to offer to tourists. The contest is also aimed at helping small and mid-sized design companies and giving opportunities to up-and-coming designers. The city is calling for designs related to the city's history, industry, and/or culture. The winning souvenirs will be sold at stores around the city. Prizes will be awarded to 28 people in total, worth up to 15 million won each, which is more than $13,000 US. A research team at the Korean science university KAIST announced Tuesday that they've developed a new model for what's called a hoons metal, which is an advanced kind of material with superconductivity at high temperatures. In superconductors, electrons flow without electrical resistance, but this normally can happen only at temperatures almost as cold as outer space. Even the examiners of the KAIST paper who approved it said that it's so groundbreaking that it's hard to accept what it's saying. The paper has been published to the world's premier physics journal, Physical Review Letters. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.